At Mother's Day breakfast, my daughter-in-law kicked me out. You're just another mouth to feed. Before the coffee even got cold, I showed her the black card statement in my name. I was the one paying the household bills. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. The coffee was still steaming in my cup when Briar's words cut through the morning air like a blade. You're just another mouth to feed. I sat there at my own kitchen table, watching her perfectly manicured nails tap against her phone screen as she spoke those words with the casual cruelty of someone discussing the weather. It was Mother's Day morning, and I had gotten up early to make breakfast for everyone. The pancakes I'd spent an hour preparing sat untouched on her plate. I mean, let's be realistic here, she continued, not even bothering to look up from her phone. Ross and I are trying to build our future, and having an extra person around just makes everything more complicated. My son Ross sat across from her, fork halfway to his mouth, and said absolutely nothing. He just kept eating, as if his wife hadn't just called his 62-year-old mother a burden. As if I were some stranger who had overstayed her welcome instead of the woman who had raised him, loved him, sacrificed everything for him. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, the coffee maker gurgling its last drops, the sound of Briar's thumbs frantically typing on her phone. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching this scene happen to someone else. Briar, I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. This is my house. She looked up then, her eyes cold and calculating. Well, technically, it's our house now. Ross is the man of the family. We're the ones making the decisions. I turned to my son, desperate for him to say something, anything, to defend me. But Ross just cleared his throat and reached for more syrup, avoiding my eyes entirely. The betrayal hit me harder than any physical blow could have. Besides, Briar continued, warming to her theme now, it's not like you contribute anything meaningful anyway. You just sit around all day watching your little TV shows, making messes we have to clean up. The unfairness of it took my breath away. I cooked every meal, cleaned every room, did every load of laundry. I grocery shopped. I maintained the house. I even tended the garden that she loved to show off to her friends. But in her mind, I was dead weight. Maybe it's time to start thinking about other living arrangements, she said with a sweet smile that didn't reach her eyes. There are some lovely senior communities around here. Very affordable. My hands trembled as I set down my coffee cup. 62 years old, and my own family was trying to throw me away like garbage. I had become invisible in my own home, a ghost, haunting the spaces where I had once belonged. Ross finally spoke, but not to defend me. We should probably finish breakfast first, he mumbled, still not meeting my gaze. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me. The pancakes I had made with such hope sat cooling on everyone's plates, barely touched. The Mother's Day card I had imagined receiving remained just that, imagination. I think I'll go to my room, I said quietly. Neither of them responded. Briar had already returned to her phone, and Ross was studying his breakfast like it held the secrets of the universe. I walked out of my own kitchen feeling like an intruder, like someone who had accidentally wandered into the wrong life. As I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, I could hear them talking in low voices behind me. Not about me, I realized. About their plans for the day, their social commitments, their busy lives that had no room for an aging mother who had suddenly become inconvenient. I closed my door and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my reflection in the dresser mirror. When had I become this person? When had I shrunk so small that my own son could sit silently while his wife carved me up with words? The tears came then, hot and angry, and full of a grief I hadn't expected. I wasn't just mourning the cruelty of this morning. I was mourning the slow death of respect, the gradual erosion of my place in my own family. Something had to change. I just didn't know what yet. Sitting alone in my bedroom, I let my mind drift back to when this all began. It hadn't started with cruelty. It had started with grief and good intentions, the way most terrible things do. When my husband Paul died 3 years ago, Ross had been so gentle with me. "Mom, you shouldn't be alone right now," he'd said, holding my hand at the funeral. "Come, stay with us for a while. Just until you feel stronger." Briar had smiled and nodded, though even then I caught something cold in her eyes. "Of course, Belinda. Family takes care of family." The while had stretched into months, then years. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being a temporary guest who needed comfort and became a permanent fixture that nobody quite knew what to do with. The changes were so gradual I barely noticed them at first. Briar would make little comments about my cooking being too heavy for their tastes, so I started preparing lighter meals. She mentioned that my television was too loud, so I bought headphones. She complained that my clothes took up too much space in the laundry, so I started doing my own loads separately, late at night when I wouldn't be in anyone's way. Each accommodation felt reasonable in isolation. I was, after all, living in their space, disrupting their routine. But looking back now, I could see how each small surrender had led to the next, until I had given up pieces of myself I didn't even realize were missing. The worst part was how Ross had changed. My son, who used to call me every day before Briar, who used to visit every weekend with flowers and stories about his work, had gradually stopped seeing me even when I was right in front of him. "Ross, could you help me move this dresser?" I had asked him last month. "Ask Briar," he'd replied without looking up from his laptop. "She's better at organizing stuff." When I approached Briar, she'd sighed dramatically. "Belinda, we've talked about this. You can't just rearrange furniture without asking us first. This affects the whole flow of the house. I never did move that dresser. It still sits in the wrong spot, blocking the window, casting shadows across my room." The invisible rules multiplied over time. Don't use the good dishes. Don't invite anyone over without permission. Don't watch TV in the living room when they might want to use it. Don't cook anything with strong smells. Don't leave any trace of yourself in the common areas. I became a master of making myself small, of anticipating needs before they were voiced, of disappearing into the background of my own life. "Your mother is so low maintenance," I heard Briar tell her friends during one of their wine nights. "She never complains about anything. It's actually kind of nice having her around, like having a live-in housekeeper who doesn't cost anything." The words stung, but I told myself she didn't mean them the way they sounded. I told myself a lot of things in those days. The morning routines became particularly painful. I would wake up early, make coffee, prepare breakfast, and set the table. When Ross and Briar came down, they would talk around me, through me, but never to me. I was furniture that happened to serve food. "I'm thinking of repainting the guest room," Briar would say to Ross while I handed her a plate of eggs. "Sounds good," he'd reply, not acknowledging that the guest room was actually my bedroom, or that I was standing right there. Their friends would come over for dinner parties, and I would cook elaborate meals, then retreat to my room so they could enjoy their evening without the awkwardness of an extra person. Sometimes I would hear them laughing late into the night, and I would wonder what it felt like to belong somewhere again. The holidays were the hardest. Last Christmas, I had spent days preparing a feast, decorating the house, wrapping gifts I couldn't really afford. When Briar's parents came to visit, I was introduced as Ross's mother who's staying with us temporarily. "How nice of you kids to take her in," Briar's mother had said with that particular smile people use when they think they're being charitable. I had wanted to scream that this was my house too, that I wasn't some charity case they had rescued from the streets. But I just smiled and offered to bring more wine from the kitchen. Now, after this morning's humiliation, I could see the pattern clearly. I had spent 3 years auditioning for a role in my own family, and I had failed the audition so completely that they were ready to write me out of the script entirely. The saddest part was that I had participated in my own erasure. Every time I had swallowed a cruel comment, every time I had made myself smaller to accommodate their comfort, I had taught them that I was dispensable. But something about this morning felt different. Maybe it was the casual cruelty of calling me another mouth to feed on Mother's Day. Maybe it was watching my son sit silently while his wife discussed disposing of me like an unwanted pet. Whatever it was, I felt something stirring in my chest that had been dormant for too long. It wasn't just hurt anymore. It was something sharper, more dangerous. It was the beginning of anger. The anger that had started as a spark in my chest grew stronger over the next few days. Every small slight, every dismissive glance, every time they talked around me like I wasn't there, it all fed the flame that was slowly consuming my willingness to disappear. But nothing could have prepared me for what I discovered on Thursday afternoon. I had been upstairs folding laundry when I heard Briar's phone ring downstairs. She answered with her usual bright tone, but something in her voice made me pause. She was talking to someone about me. "Oh, you know how it is with old people," she was saying, her voice carrying clearly up the stairs. "They get so needy and demanding. She acts like she owns the place." I set down the towel I was folding and moved closer to the top of the stairs. "No, Ross won't say anything to her," Briar continued. "He's too guilty about his dad dying. But honestly, we can't keep this up much longer. She's becoming a real problem." My heart started pounding. I knew I shouldn't listen, but I couldn't make myself move away. "The nursing homes aren't that expensive," she was saying. "And once we get her settled somewhere, we can figure out the whole inheritance situation. I mean, she can't live forever, right?" The casualness of it, discussing my death like a financial planning opportunity, made my knees weak. I had to grip the banister to keep from falling. But she wasn't finished. "Trust me, we've got it all figured out. Ross is already on all her accounts as a beneficiary. We just need to wait for the right moment to bring up the nursing home idea. Make it seem like it's for her own good." I stumbled back to my room, closing the door as quietly as I could. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the knob. They were planning to warehouse me somewhere while they waited for me to die. My own son was part of this. The guilt I thought he felt about his father's death wasn't protecting me. It was just making him more passive while his wife orchestrated my disposal. I sat on my bed, trying to process what I'd heard. But before I could fully absorb the betrayal, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Ross was coming up, and he was talking on his phone, too. "Yeah, I know it sounds harsh," I heard him say as he passed my door. "But Briar's right. Mom's not getting any younger, and it's not fair to expect us to be her caretakers forever." He went into their bedroom, but his voice carried through the thin walls. "She doesn't really contribute anything anyway. She just kind of exists. It's depressing, honestly. Sometimes I look at her and wonder if that's what I have to look forward to when I get old." The words hit me like physical blows. This was my son, the baby I had carried for 9 months, the child I had raised alone after his father died in that car accident when Ross was only 8. I had worked 2 jobs to keep him in good schools, had gone without so he could have everything he needed. "The nursing home thing makes sense," he continued. "She'll probably be happier around people her own age anyway. And let's be honest, the house will be a lot more peaceful without her moping around all the time." Moping. He thought my grief, my loneliness, my gradual disappearance from their lives was moping. Briar's already found a few places that look decent. Nothing too expensive, but clean. Mom's got enough saved up to cover it for a while, and after that, well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making any sound. They had discussed my finances, my future, my eventual death, all without including me in the conversation. I was a problem to be solved, not a person to be considered. The worst part was hearing Ross's voice. so matter-of-fact about discarding me. This was the same voice that used to read me bedtime stories when he was little and wanted to make me feel better after his father died. The same voice that had promised to always take care of me. "Yeah, I think we'll bring it up next week," he was saying. "Make it seem spontaneous, like we just want what's best for her. She'll probably resist at first, but she doesn't really have a choice." I didn't have a choice. In their minds, I was already powerless, already defeated. I heard him end the call and walk back downstairs. A few minutes later, I heard them both laughing about something in the kitchen, their voices light and carefree. Planning my exile hadn't dampened their mood at all. I sat in my room for hours, replaying every word I'd heard. The clinical way they discussed my future. The casual cruelty of waiting for me to die. The complete absence of love or even basic respect in their voices. But underneath the devastation, something else was growing. The anger I'd felt after the Mother's Day breakfast was crystallizing into something harder, more focused. They thought I was powerless. They thought I was just a helpless old woman who would accept whatever they decided for me. They thought I had no choice. They were about to learn how wrong they were. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't thinking about how to make myself smaller or how to avoid conflict. I was thinking about how I had gotten here, what I had allowed them to take from me, and what I still had left to fight with. They wanted to treat me like I was already dead, but I had never felt more alive. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. 3 days after overhearing their phone conversations, Ross and Briar cornered me in the kitchen during breakfast. Their timing was deliberate. They wanted me trapped, sitting down, with nowhere to run. "Mom," Ross began, his voice taking on that artificially gentle tone people use when they're about to deliver bad news. "Briar and I have been talking, and we think it might be time to discuss some changes." I set down my coffee cup carefully, keeping my expression neutral. "What kind of changes?" Briar jumped in before Ross could continue. "Well, we're thinking about your living situation. We know. You've been comfortable here, but we're wondering if you might be happier somewhere more, appropriate for someone your age." "You mean a nursing home?" I said flatly. They exchanged a quick glance. Ross cleared his throat. "Not necessarily a nursing home. More like a senior living community. Somewhere you could make friends with people who share your interests." "My interests," I repeated. "And what exactly do you think my interests are?" Another glance between them. Briar took the lead this time. "Well, you know, senior activities, bingo, maybe some crafts, things that would keep you engaged." The condescension in her voice was breathtaking. She was talking to me like I was a child who needed to be entertained with finger paints and sing-alongs. "The thing is," Ross continued, "maintaining this house is getting expensive. We're feeling stretched financially, and having to support 3 people instead of 2 is putting a real strain on our budget." That was the moment I had been waiting for, the opening I needed. I stood up slowly and walked to the kitchen drawer, where I kept the household papers. Ross and Briar watched me nervously, probably thinking I was going to pull out some sentimental photos or letters to guilt them with. Instead, I pulled out a thick folder and set it on the table between us. "You're feeling financially stretched," I said, opening the folder. "That's interesting." I pulled out the first document, the mortgage statement for the house. "This house that's getting so expensive to maintain? I've been paying the mortgage for the past 2 years." Their faces went pale, but I wasn't finished. I pulled out another statement. The utilities, the insurance, the property taxes, all coming out of my accounts. Then another. "The credit card you used for your vacation to Mexico last month, Briar. That was my card." And another. "The car payments for both of your vehicles." By now, Ross was staring at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. Briar's mouth was opening and closing, but no sound was coming out. The groceries we eat, the cable bill for the television you didn't want me watching in the living room, the landscaping service that maintains the yard you love to show off to, your friends, all of it paid for by the woman who's just another mouth to feed. I spread the statements across the table like a poker player revealing a winning hand. So tell me again about how expensive it is to support 3 people instead of 2. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. I could hear the refrigerator humming, the clock ticking, the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. Ross was the first to find his voice. Mom, I didn't realize. You didn't realize? I cut him off. You didn't realize that money was coming from somewhere? You thought the mortgage fairy was paying your bills? Briar's shock was quickly turning to anger. Well, you never said anything. How were we supposed to know? You were supposed to know because you're adults living in a house, I replied. Adults generally understand that houses cost money to maintain, but more importantly, you were supposed to ask. I picked up another document, the bank statement showing the automatic transfers I had set up. Every month for 2 years, I've been transferring money to cover your expenses. Not our expenses, your expenses, the car payments, the credit cards, the gym memberships, the spa treatments, the dinners out that I'm never invited to. Ross was staring at his hands now, his face red with what I hoped was shame. Mom, if you were having trouble with the costs, you should have said something. Having trouble with the costs? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Ross, I'm not having trouble with the costs. I'm having trouble with being treated like garbage by the people whose lives I'm financing. Briar's face was cycling through emotions, shock, embarrassment, and now a cold calculation that I recognized all too well. Well, she said slowly, we appreciate everything you've done, but that doesn't mean you get to hold it over our heads forever. We never asked you to pay for everything. You're right, I said, sitting back down. You never asked. You just took. And when I became inconvenient, you started planning to throw me away. Ross looked up sharply. What do you mean? I met his eyes directly. I heard your phone conversations, both of you, discussing nursing homes, discussing my finances, discussing how long you'd have to wait before you could access my inheritance. The color drained from both their faces completely now. You thought I was just a pathetic old woman who would go quietly when you decided you were done with me, I continued. But here's what you forgot. Pathetic old women don't usually have the financial resources to support 2 adults in the lifestyle you've become accustomed to. I stood up again, gathering the papers back into their folder. So let's talk about changes, I said. Because you're right, some things definitely need to change around here. The week that followed our kitchen confrontation was the strangest of my life. Ross and Briar walked around me like I was a loaded gun that might go off at any moment. They were overly polite, asking if I needed anything, offering to help with tasks I'd been doing alone for years. But I could see the calculation in their eyes, especially Briar's. She was regrouping, trying to figure out her next move. I knew this temporary politeness wouldn't last long. That's why I spent those 7 days planning my exit with the same methodical precision I'd once used to plan Ross's birthday parties and Christmas mornings. First, I called my attorney, Margaret Chen, whom I hadn't spoken to since Paul's funeral. Belinda, she said warmly, how are you holding up? I need to make some changes to my financial arrangements, I told her. And I need to do it quietly. Margaret didn't ask questions, which is why I'd always liked her. Within 3 days, I had a new bank account that Ross knew nothing about. Within a week, I had transferred most of my assets to accounts he couldn't access. The house was trickier. It was in my name, but Ross lived there. I couldn't just throw him out. He was still my son despite everything. But I could make some adjustments to the financial arrangements. I spent hours online, researching small towns within driving distance. I wanted somewhere quiet, somewhere I could start over without the weight of their expectations crushing me. I found a little house for rent in Millbrook, 2 hours north. It had a garden and a front porch, and the rent was less than what I'd been spending on Ross and Briar's credit card bills each month. The hardest part was canceling the automatic transfers. Every month for 2 years, I had watched money flow out of my account to cover their expenses. Canceling those transfers felt like cutting an umbilical cord. I was sitting at my computer when Briar knocked on my bedroom door. "Belinda, can we talk?" I minimized the banking window and turned to face her. She was wearing her sweetest smile, the one that usually preceded a request for money or a favor. "I just wanted to say how much Ross and I appreciate everything you've done for us," she began. "We know we haven't always been perfect, but we're family, and family should support each other." I nodded, waiting for the real message. "The thing is," she continued, perching on the edge of my bed like we were old friends sharing secrets, "we've been thinking about what you said the other day, about changes." "Oh?" "We think you're right. We should all contribute more fairly to the household expenses. So we've decided that you should pay a monthly rent to live here. Nothing crazy, just enough to cover your share of the mortgage and utilities." I stared at her, amazed by her audacity. Even after learning that I'd been paying all their expenses, she was trying to charge me rent to live in my own house. "How much rent were you thinking?" I asked calmly. "We were thinking $1,800 a month. That's really reasonable for a room and shared living space. $1,800. For a bedroom in a house I was already paying the mortgage on. And of course," she continued, "we'd expect you to continue helping with groceries and utilities, since you eat here and use electricity and water." I nodded slowly. "That sounds very reasonable, Briar. Very fair." Her smile brightened. She thought she'd won. "When would you want me to start paying this rent?" I asked. "Well, we were thinking the 1st of next month. That gives you time to adjust your budget." "Perfect," I said. "That gives me time to make some adjustments." After she left, I went back to my computer and finished what I'd been doing. I canceled the automatic mortgage payment. I canceled the utilities. I canceled the insurance payments. I canceled every single recurring payment that had been keeping their comfortable life afloat. Then I called the landlord in Millbrook and put down a deposit on the little house with the garden. The nuclear option was ready. I just had to decide when to use it. The decision was made for me the next evening. I was washing dishes after dinner when I heard Ross and Briar talking in the living room. They weren't being particularly quiet. They'd gotten comfortable discussing me like I wasn't there. $1,800 a month is just the beginning, Briar was saying. Once she gets used to paying rent, we can start charging her for other things. Cleaning fees, food preparation, laundry service. "You think she'll go for that?" Ross asked. "She doesn't have a choice. Where else is she going to go? She needs us more than we need her." I set down the dish I was washing and dried my hands. The casual cruelty of it, turning me into a prophet, sent her in my own home, was breathtaking. But it was also clarifying. They weren't family. They were parasites. And I was done feeding them. I walked into the living room, and they both looked up with guilty expressions. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday," I told Briar. "About the rent and the new arrangements." "Oh, good," she said, brightening. "We really think it's going to work out better for everyone." "I'm sure it will," I agreed. "But I've decided to make some changes of my own." I sat down in the chair across from them, the chair I'd been gradually pushed out of over the past 3 years. "I'm moving out," I said simply. The words hung in the air like smoke. Ross blinked several times, as if he hadn't heard correctly. "Moving out?" he repeated. "Mom, you don't have to do that. We can work something out." "Oh, I think moving out is the perfect solution," I said. "You'll have your privacy, your space, your freedom to live your lives without an extra mouth to feed. And I'll have my independence." Briar's face had gone very pale. But where will you go?" "I found a lovely little house in Millbrook. It has a garden and a front porch. And it's much more affordable than $1,800 a month. Millbrook? Ross stood up, agitated now. That's 2 hours away. Mom, you can't just leave. We're your family. Yes, I said quietly. You are. And that's exactly why this is so heartbreaking. I stood up and headed toward the stairs. I'll be moving out this weekend. I wanted to give you time to make your own arrangements. What arrangements? Briar's voice was sharp now, panicked. I paused at the bottom of the stairs and looked back at them. Well, you'll need to figure out how to pay for the house, the cars, the credit cards, the utilities, all those expenses that have been coming out of my accounts. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see the exact moment when the reality of their situation hit them. You can't just cut us off, Briar said, her voice rising. We have commitments, obligations. So do I replied. My obligation is to myself. Something I forgot for a while, but I remember now. I started up the stairs, leaving them staring after me. Behind me, I could hear Briar's voice, high and desperate. Ross, do something. She can't just leave us like this. But Ross said nothing, because deep down, he knew I could. 3 months later, I was sitting on my front porch in Millbrook, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. My garden was thriving, tomatoes heavy on the vine, sunflowers reaching toward the light, herbs scenting the morning air with their fragrance. I had never been happier. The little house had become more than just a refuge. It had become a revelation. I woke up when I wanted to wake up. I ate what I wanted to eat. I watched television in my own living room without asking permission. I had rediscovered the woman I used to be before I became invisible. My phone rang, interrupting my morning peace. Ross's name appeared on the screen. He'd been calling regularly for the past month, but our conversations had been strained, careful. Today felt different somehow. Hi, Mom, he said when I answered. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. Hello, Ross. How are you? I've been better. He paused, and I could hear him taking a deep breath. Mom, I need to tell you something. Briar and I are getting divorced. I wasn't surprised. Without my financial support, their marriage had cracked like a dam under pressure. But hearing it still made my heart ache for the pain in my son's voice. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I meant it. She left last month. Said she couldn't handle the financial stress, that I wasn't the man she thought she married. His laugh was bitter. Turns out she was right about that last part. I waited, letting him find his words. I lost the house, Mom. Had to sell it to pay off the debts. I'm renting a small apartment now, working 2 jobs just to make ends meet. Part of me wanted to rush in with comfort, with offers of help, with all the maternal instincts that had gotten me into trouble before. But I had learned to sit with discomfort, both mine and others. That must be very difficult, I said. It is. But you know what's worse? I deserved it. All of it. His voice cracked. I let her treat you like garbage, and I treated you like garbage myself. I don't even know how to apologize for that. I closed my eyes, feeling tears threaten. This was the son I remembered, the boy with the conscience, the young man who used to call me his hero. Ross? No, let me finish, please. He was crying now. I could hear it. I've had 3 months to think about what I did, what I allowed to happen. I threw away the most important person in my life for someone who never loved me at all. And the worst part is, you tried to show me love every single day, and I was too selfish and weak to see it. I stood up and walked to the porch railing, gripping it with my free hand. The anger I had carried for so long was still there, but underneath, it was something else. Grief for the time we had lost, for the relationship that had been damaged, for the pain we had both endured. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, he continued. I know I have no right to ask, but I need you to know that I see it now. I see everything I took from you, everything I let her take from you. and I hate myself for it. I thought about the woman I had been 3 months ago, small and invisible, accepting cruelty as the price of belonging. Then I thought about the woman I was now, strong enough to live alone, brave enough to start over, wise enough to know the difference between forgiveness and foolishness. "Ross," I said softly, "do you remember when you were 8 years old and your father had just died?" "Yes," he whispered. "You were so angry. At God, at me, at the world. You told me you hated everyone and everything, that you wished you could die too." "I remember." "And do you remember what I told you?" He was quiet for a moment. "You said that hate was too heavy a burden for a little boy to carry. That forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, but it meant choosing not to let the hurt poison everything. Good that was left." "Yes." I smiled through my tears. I've been thinking about that conversation a lot lately. I sat back down in my rocking chair, the one I'd bought with my first month's worth of money that stayed in my own account. "Ross, I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because God has forgiven me for so many things I didn't deserve. And because carrying this anger is too heavy a burden for an old woman like me." His sob of relief was audible through the phone. "But," I continued, and my voice was firm now, "forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean going back to the way things were. I understand. Do you? Because I need you to really understand this, Ross. I love you. You are my son, and that will never change. But I will never again allow myself to be treated as less than a person by anyone, including you. I wouldn't expect you to. I don't want you to. If you want a relationship with me, it will be on equal ground. I won't be your financial safety net, your backup plan, or your caretaker. I'll be your mother, but I'll also be my own person with my own life and my own boundaries." "Yes," he said quickly. "Yes, that's what I want too." "Good. Then you can start by visiting me here, in my home, as my guest. We can have dinner and talk like adults. We can rebuild what was broken, but we'll build it stronger this time." "I'd like that more than anything," he said. "I'd like that so much." After we hung up, I sat on my porch for a long time, watching the day unfold. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't about absolving someone else of their guilt. It was about freeing yourself from the prison of resentment. I still had boundaries. I still had standards. I still had self-respect. But I also had my son back, and he had his mother back. Not the diminished, invisible woman he had taken for granted, but the whole person I had always been underneath. As I rocked gently in my chair, surrounded by the garden I had planted with my own hands, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete peace. I was 62 years old, and for the first time in decades I was exactly where I belonged. Right here, in my own life, on my own terms. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.